Hey, what's up everybody and welcome back to News Toast, and it's that time of the month again where we get to talk about some more Xbox Game Pass games, but I mean, really, I just can't get over how good they've been doing as of late. It really feels like this has been one of the best stretches ever for Game Pass, maybe the absolute best, and that continues into the month of October as well. We have some really exciting games to talk about today for you subscribers. Then also it appears Sony is having some troubles with their live service games, so much so that one of their biggest projects might actually be in a little bit of danger. As always, though, before we get started, do hit those buttons below. It's greatly appreciated. Seriously, thank you all so much for your support. But without further ado, let's just go and jump right into things, starting off with a very strange topic. So Spider-Man 2 is coming out later this month. I think it looks fantastic, but its reported 100% completion time is right around the 30-hour-long mark, or at least according to one person. This was posted up by Chris Gaming 95 over on Twitter, who platinumed Spider-Man 2 in 30 hours. Now, he later on clarified that he considers himself a fast playthrough player, though he doesn't skip cutscenes or anything like that. To me, it just kind of makes it sound like he doesn't really explore a ton and instead just kind of focuses on the objectives at hand. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but however, this whole story has kind of blown up online because there's now this big controversy. Is 30 hours for a 100% playthrough long enough for a $70 game? Yeah, I mean, I feel like exclusive titles are just scrutinized to this whole different level, and we've seen that a few different times in 2023. We saw that with Starfield over the last couple months. I mean, that was absolutely ridiculous. We saw it with Final Fantasy 16, and now we're seeing these type of controversies for Spider-Man 2 as well. You can take that as you will, but sticking with the topic at hand here, what is the perfect completion playtime for a AAA game? I mean, if you look at something like Assassin's Creed as an example, and fans seem happy that Mirage is a shorter, more concise game than something like Valhalla, which, you know, that was often criticized for being too bloated. However, on the opposite side of things here, you have Spider-Man 2, and it's being criticized for being roughly the same length as the first game, and it's also a similar length to something like Assassin's Creed Mirage. If you look at the playtime, the first game took about 35 hours to get a platinum, and its average playthrough is around 17 to 18 hours. So you're really kind of seeing both sides of the coin here. Which is actually better, long or short? And that's kind of the thing about this topic for me. It doesn't actually sound like Spider-Man 2 is a short game. It's really just kind of right in that middle ground, which, I mean, personally for me, I think that that's actually a good thing. I thought the length for the first game felt good. It didn't overstay its welcome by drawing out the story or by giving you a bunch of random missions just to kind of reach a specific time quota. They kept it fun, and the story was always interesting, and it's one of the reasons I think that fans loved this so much, and that's kind of my hope for the sequel as well. I mean, if anything, I mean, you can criticize Miles Morales. I did not really care for that game, and I thought it was too short, but I really feel like, you know, this is a topic that's being a little bit overblown right now, and maybe that has something to do with the increased prices this generation, and I can understand from that perspective, but let me know how you all feel about this in the comments below. Now, we also got an update for Alan Wake 2's performance mode. They reported last week that Alan Wake 2 is getting a surprise performance mode for the Xbox Series X and a PlayStation 5. Now, they didn't originally plan this. It was originally intended to be a 30 FPS game, but apparently its performance modes are surprisingly good. Now, keep in mind, we still need to see if this means we'll get a stable 60 frames per second, as all this news has kind of come last minute. I'm crossing my fingers for that. We'll see. But unfortunately, the Xbox Series S will not get that chance. They just confirmed that there won't be a performance mode for the Xbox Series S. Now, they didn't elaborate as to exactly why, but just based on what we've heard already, I think the reason for this is because, again, they didn't actually plan for Alan Wake 2 to have a performance mode at all. It was designed and optimized as a 30 FPS game, and I imagine the main way that they are increasing the frame rate for the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X really just kind of comes down to dropping their resolution, and considering the Xbox Series S doesn't really have the same raw power for higher resolutions in AAA games, they probably couldn't increase its frame rate the same way. Its resolution at 30 frames per second is probably already around 1080p, maybe 1440p, so it likely wouldn't have the same leeway as the other more powerful consoles. I think by this point, though, most fans are starting to kind of understand that. The Xbox Series S, I think, is a good console for what it is, especially at that price point. It does allow fans to enjoy these next-generation games. I think it's a good entry point for this generation. But, yeah, there were sacrifices made, and there's going to be times where there's going to be noticeable differences, as we're seeing here. Speaking of Xbox, though, Xbox Game Pass has truly, and I mean truly, been on fire over the last few months. Really, I'd say since August. I mean, we're talking about the additions of Quake 2, Sea of Stars, Starfield, Lies of P, and also Cocoon. I mean, we're talking about some top-tier day one games here, and, well, October isn't slowing down in the slightest. Check this out. Game Pass subscribers for the first wave of October will get From Space, Like a Dragon Ishin, Forza Motorsport, and then also Warhammer Darktide. Now, there's also a couple new games that they just launched today, including the Lamplighters League and Gotham Knights as well. The big new addition, though, of course, is Forza Motorsports. This is a first-party Xbox game, and the previews for this game has been absolutely glowing so far. It might actually be the best racing game made so far this generation, based on some of the praise that I've seen online. Now, some of that's going to depend on what type of racing game you like. Do you like arcade racers like, let's say, Forza Horizon, or do you like more simulation racers like this? But if you do, Forza, it is shaping up to be one of the genre's best, if not the very best. Turn 10 has reportedly made a lot of improvements. This is the longest gap between Forza Motorsports titles that we've really ever seen, and it sounds like the wait has been well worth it. There's been some changes to the car mechanics. I've heard it feels like the cars have a little bit more weight to them this time around, but I tell you one thing that really impresses me about this game, or at least from what I've seen, is its visuals in rainy weather. I've seen a few videos now, both in night and day, and I mean, this game, it truly looks stunning. It can run 60 frames per second with ray tracing, and it does have that dynamic 4K resolution, and I mean, it shows. It's a good-looking game to really showcase your Xbox Series X, and I mean, if anything else, I'd say check it out for that reason alone. If you want to see the power the Xbox Series X can offer, maybe try Forza. Car games are really just always a great way to showcase hardware. If you want to jump in, though, you'll be able to play as soon enough as it launches into Game Pass on October 10th, unless you want to purchase the premium add-on, which unlocks its early access 5 days ahead of time, similar to what they did with Starfield. Actually, they had a lot of success doing that as well. Now, the other big AAA edition here, though, is Like a Dragon Ishin, which will be out on October 17th. This actually released earlier just this year, so it's really not all that old, and it's also a really good game. It does have an 81 overall score on Metacritic, and it's a spinoff to the Yakuza series set in the late Edo period. The thing about this particular game, though, is that if you want a fun, single-player, story-driven experience, the Yakuza games, I mean, they're always worth a playthrough. I'd also say that Ishin is kind of refreshing in the sense that it's a different setting than the other games, and it can also be played without knowing the entire story of the franchise. Outside of recognizing well-known characters, I mean, you're going to get that fan service if you have played through all the games, but it's a side story that's unrelated to the main story. I'll say this much, though, I really can't recommend this and the other Yakuza games enough. If you like story-driven games, I firmly do believe that these are must-play games, and you can play through a large portion of the series directly through Game Pass, which is pretty amazing. Now, there's also Warhammer Darktide, which is finally launching on consoles as an Xbox Series exclusive. It did release last year on PC, but if you're looking for a fun cooperative shooter, Darktide might be worth a try. It also gets the benefit of getting all those upgrades and updates that the developer has made over a course of a year. So hopefully, it'll be even better than that original PC release. You even get the Lamplighters League Day 1, which is out today, and it's been drawing a lot of attention. It does have an attractive art style, the gameplay seems fairly solid, and the premise as a whole is quite interesting. You basically form a team of a bunch of misfits, scoundrels, thieves, and things like that. It might be at the very least worth a try if you like turn-based strategy games. So yeah, I mean, this is another loaded lineup of games with some pretty major inclusions, especially with Forza. That's 2 back-to-back months with major first-party exclusives for Xbox Game Pass. Right now, you Game Pass subscribers are legitimately being spoiled. All right, so Let's go ahead and switch gears here for a moment, though, because there's been a lot of news as of late regarding Sony's live service games. As we all kind of know, under Jim Ryan's leadership, Sony has refocused a lot of their attention on live service titles. They have like 10 live service games in development right now, and 60% of their budget is reportedly going towards these type of games, which is, that has drawn some scrutiny online. This is not something that Sony is known for, so there has been some mixed responses over their newfound direction with these live service games, and I think that's understandable. I've said myself multiple times, I'm not thrilled about this direction either, personally, and I know I can't speak for everybody, but for me, I'm okay with them trying their hands with some live service titles. I don't think that that's a problem at all, but at the same time, I can't help but think that a 70-30 split in favor of single player would have been a much, much better direction, a much better choice, and I think fans would have been much more excited about something like that. But at the end of the day, the truth is, it really just all kind of depends on if they actually can have success. If they succeed, it doesn't really matter what I or fans think. The bottom line for them is, will their bet pay off? But that right there is the thing, because as I've said 100 times on this channel, and not just with Sony games, but with all live service titles, live service games are mythical cash cows. Every publisher would love to have the next mega hit, but as we've seen time and time and time again, there's more failures when it comes to live service games than there are success stories. These are risky games to make, and it sounds like Sony they're starting to kind of learn that as well. Jason Schreier posted up a big report claiming that Sony's pivot to live service games has been uncomfortable for some of their studios, and insiders are worried about Sony's quote-unquote seemingly misplaced bets on live service games. Now, keep in mind, most of their studios have strictly been known for single-player titles up to this point, and, well, live service games, they are completely different. They are developed differently. Just because you can make a good single-player game, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can make a good multiplayer game, and vice versa. It goes both ways. And that seems to be a little bit of what's happening here, including with their premier flagship studio, Naughty Dog. Unfortunately, another report came out today which only backs up Jason Schreier's original report. Kotaku is now claiming that their source told them that Naughty Dog's The Last of Us multiplayer game, aka Factions 2, has basically been put on ice. Now, that means it's not entirely been canceled, silver lining, I guess, but it sounds like it only has a small team right now, and they're basically reevaluating what they're going to do with this game from this point forward. To make matters worse, though, is that Naughty Dog also laid off some of their contract workers with no severance packages, and they've been pressuring those affected to be quiet about the situation. That is not a good look. Really, none of this is a good look whatsoever. This is a bad look for Sony, this is a bad look for Naughty Dog, and this is also a bad look for their future live service games as well, which again, fans have already been a little bit hesitant with this new direction that Sony has been taking. Now, hopefully, Factions eventually releases. I know a lot of people like the original in the first game, but I mean, this has been a weird game to follow. We've been hearing about its teased soonish incoming release since The Last of Us Part 2 debuted back in 2020, but now here we are 3 years later, and we've yet to see any type of gameplay, and with this news here, there's a very real question if it'll release ever at all. I mean, I guess we'll see what happens with that. If they really are just going back to the drawing boards and trying to find a new direction, maybe they just don't turn this into a live service game and just release it as a regular multiplayer game. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would have been happy with that in the first place if they just dropped a regular multiplayer faction game next to The Last of Us Part 2. But that's not what they did. And, I mean, yeah, this is a disastrous start for Sony's direction on live service games. Now, we do have one last story to talk about here, though, and I'm going to make this quick just because I think this news amounts to pretty much nothing, but I've seen a lot of reports on this, and that's that Nintendo has confirmed they plan on releasing new Switch games all the way into March of 2025. Now, with those Switch 2 leaks going around and it being claimed to be a 2024 release, I guess certain outlets are trying to connect the two stories together, but truthfully, this means absolutely nothing, and honestly, it's to be expected. Nintendo isn't just going to abandon their current Switch because its successor might release next year. I mean, look at the Xbox One and the PS4 as an example. They were getting new first-party titles well after the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 released, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Switch gets some cross-generation games as well. Metroid Prime 4, that is a game that's been often speculated as a cross-generation title. But yeah, the Switch has sold more than 130 million units worldwide, and yeah, I don't think Nintendo's just going to simply abandon it immediately. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though. We're asking you all, do you think Final Fantasy VII Remake will ever be released for Xbox and Nintendo? And as you can see here, most of you all believes yes, it will happen, but the largest portion believes not until the entire trilogy is finished. And you know what? I could actually see that happening. Maybe Sony and Square Enix made a deal to lock it down until at least the third game, if not a period longer than that. And I think the 12 months after Rebirth's release will be quite telling. If Square Enix still ignores Xbox and Nintendo, Sony, yeah, probably has it locked down. But, you know, at the same time, if a complete edition does eventually come over to Xbox and Nintendo, well, you are going to get an insane amount of great content. The first game, I think, is absolutely amazing, and I'm expecting Rebirth to be as well, if not really even better. It's looking phenomenal. I'm expecting all of these games to be great, and I would imagine that Square Enix is going to want to capitalize on that further with more platforms when they're allowed to in the future. The question really just kind of remains, how long will Nintendo and Xbox fans have to wait? And looks like you all are expecting at least until the end of the trilogy. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.